Gerald. Happy summer.
What's so happy about it?
Oh, you're still bummed about our summer trip getting canceled, huh?
Well, I was just looking forward to going to New York City for the first time. I was gonna get a big greasy pizza, visit some of my relatives on Sesame Street, and see my very first Broadway show.
You never forget your first. Well, hey, Gerald, we may be stuck at home, but we can still travel to New York in our imagination. Hey, you guys, let's go to the bodega, get a bagel with schmear, and avoid Times Square as much as possible. Walk in here. Wow, I'm really, really good at this.
Yeah, for sure. But you won't know what might be more fun? Talking about musicals that take place in New York. Huh?
You're absolutely right, Gerald. It's time for a lesson on New York musicals.
Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square.
Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there. Whisper of how I'm yearning to mingle with the old-time throng. Give my regards to old Broadway and say that I'll be there ere long.
People in the arts love to write art about their art. If it's not Hollywood perpetually making movies about the glamour of filmmaking, then it's New York City churning out plays and musicals all about the Big Apple. Songs about New York have been a thing since Broadway was born, which absolutely tracks. The songs of Broadway dominated the pop charts from the 1900s all the way through the 1950s, as did the Tin Pan Alley composers who wrote them. Irving Berlin and Cole Porter both wrote I Love New York songs in their time. Rodgers and Hart's Manhattan and George M. Cohan's Give My Regards to Broadway are classic standards we still perform today. And while not originally intended to be about New York, George Gershwin's symphonic suite Rhapsody in Blue has become the unofficial anthem of the city that never sleeps. The first musical that really celebrated everything about NYC came in 1944 with On the Town. The image of the dancing sailors belting out New York, New York is so iconic, I practically expect to see them skipping through Rockefeller Center every time I'm there. Inspired by the risks taken by Oklahoma a year before, a team of wide-eyed youngsters looked to make their mark on the world of Broadway. The book and lyrics were written by the team of Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who got their start performing with their sketch comedy act, The Reviewers, in dingy nightclubs around Manhattan. Comden and Green were joined by Leonard Bernstein, who wrote the music, and choreographer Jerome Robbins, who staged numerous dance sequences, including a dream ballet. The quartet was intent on writing one of these newfangled situation shows where the songs and dancing drive the plot forward, just like Oklahoma. Eventually, Robbins, Bernstein, Comden, and Green would come to define the world of Broadway's New York through the golden age of musicals between 1943 and 1964. Comden and Green's ability to write biting comedy and hysterical satire worked perfectly in their other New York musicals, Wonderful Town and Applause. Meanwhile, Jerome Robbins and Leonard Bernstein would team up again a little over a decade later to work on a much darker musical, 1957's West Side Story, which swapped out dancing sailors for feuding gangs in this Romeo and Juliet adaptation set in 1950s New York. Unlike On the Town and 1953's Wonderful Town, West Side Story paints a very different picture of New York, all while commenting on race relations between the white teens and the growing Latino community. With the help of lyricist Stephen Sondheim and book writer Arthur Lawrence, Jerome Robbins would direct and lend his distinctive choreography to the show. The snaps, outstretched legs, and acrobatics all came to define the Robbins style and are indelibly linked to the show. Meanwhile, Bernstein's score borders on symphonic, making the show sound unlike any of its contemporaries. Broadway's golden age had a few other memorable New York musicals. We mentioned Wonderful Town, which focused on the artists of Greenwich Village and was based on the popular My Sister Eileen stories published in The New Yorker during the 1930s. But there was also Fiorello! Gotta say the exclamation point. Fiorello! By Bach and Harnick's 1959 musical about the much-beloved mayor of New York City, Fiorello LaGuardia. And probably the most successful New York musical from this era would have to be 1950's Guys and Dolls, based on the fables of Damon Runyon. Guys and Dolls tells the story of a group of lovable gangsters with music and lyrics by Frank Lesser. Runyon's distinct voice can be heard throughout the musical and even defines how we view the stereotypical old-timey gangster today. The opening sequence, choreographed by Michael Kidd, is even called Runyonland.
My sister Eileen, Fiorello LaGuardia, and the Damon Runyon stories are all ingrained into the mythology of New York City, and their musical counterparts only managed to heighten this connection.
I got the horse right here, your name is Paul Revere.
The 1960s and 70s would see so many different kinds of New York musical. For instance, since many of the older audience members remembered the early days of Broadway, there are a few NYC nostalgia shows, throwback musicals, if you will. Both 1964's Funny Girl and 1971's Follies reminisced on the heyday of the Ziegfeld Follies in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. The former telling the true story of one of the Ziegfeld Follies' biggest stars, Fanny Brice, while the latter focused on aged former chorus girls confronting the ghosts of their past selves. And in 1980, we got a stage adaptation of one of Hollywood's first movie musicals, 42nd Street. This is the musical that gave us the iconic line, "You're going out there a youngster, but you gotta come back a star." It's a Cinderella story that showbiz loves to celebrate.
Ah, tale as old as time. Bright-eyed newbie Peggy Sawyer is the understudy to the lead who breaks her leg on opening night, putting Peggy in the lead and making her a star.
Oof. That's correct, Gerald. Well done. Although nowadays we can swap out Peggy Sawyer for Sutton Foster.
NYC nostalgia musicals haven't slowed down with the new millennium. As I said, Sutton Foster was plucked from the ensemble and won a Tony Award for Thoroughly Modern Millie, another film-to-stage adaptation that celebrates everything about New York in the 1920s, with an entire score a pastiche to the jazz age. But going back to 42nd Street for a moment, this musical takes place in 1933, and it's not the only one. Annie, Fiorello, Mame, and Wonderful Town all celebrate the post-Depression, pre-World War II era. And there are musicals that go back even farther. 1964's Hello, Dolly and 1998's Ragtime both take place in the late 1890s, early 1900s in New York, but with widely differing messages. Hello, Dolly is a feel-good musical adaptation of Thornton Wilder's The Matchmaker, all about a clever and optimistic middle-aged woman helping quirky couples find love. Ragtime tells the story of different racial and socio-political groups coming together in New York's melting pot during the height of immigration. Both managed to capture New York and the American dream in vastly opposing ways. And even in the past few years, we've gotten musical scores that are anachronistic, meaning belonging to another time period, to go along with these throwback shows. 2012's Newsies takes place in 1899, but the score is pure musical theater pop. And then there's Hamilton, which takes place between 1776 and 1804, but utilizes a score made up of hip-hop, pop, rap, and musical theater, all styles grounded in New York culture. There are plenty of musicals that captured New York in the moment, though. 1961's How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying delightfully skewered the Manhattan corporate world, and 1966's Sweet Charity told the timeless story of Gwen Verdon's hooker with a heart of gold, thus channeling the seedy underbelly of NYC, all through the lens of director-choreographer Bob Fosse. Two New York musicals from 1968 captured the dichotomy between the musical styles of the late 60s. Promises, Promises, with its poppy Burt Bacharach score, and the hippie counterculture phenomenon Hair, the American tribal love rock musical, Broadway's first full-length rock score. Oh, speaking of rock musical phenomenons, we can't talk about New York musicals without mentioning 1996's Rent, the show that transfers the Parisian bohemians of Puccini's opera La Boheme into New York's Alphabet City during the AIDS crisis.
I feel like I could travel through NYC just with the name-dropping in La Vie Boheme alone. What brings a mogul in his own mind to the Life Cafe?
Ooh, to Absolute, to Choice, to the Village Voice, to Sondheim!
But back to the 70s. Cinema became a lot edgier and introspective in the 1970s, and Broadway followed suit. 1970 would bring about Sondheim's Company, a show made up of vignettes, no linear plot, and maybe the original white 30-somethings living in New York musical. And Applause, Broadway's take on All About Eve, but for the modern modern era. A chorus line would come out in 1975 after months of workshops, pulling real stories from Broadway dancers. A chorus line managed to capture the brutal life of a Broadway dancer, yet make it universally beloved and relatable. This stripped-down, realistic musical world was in stark contrast to the flashy nostalgia musical Annie that came 2 years later, though, complete with its own New York song.
$3, 2 bags, 1 me.
And the trend continues through the 21st century with The Producers, Mel Brooks's record-breaking musical adaptation of his film by the same name, lampooning the world of Broadway while also being a loving homage. Then there's 2003's Avenue Q, the musical that utilizes Sesame Street-style storytelling to present the realities of living in New York in a post-9/11 world, and keeping optimistic while you do.
You know, I almost had a callback for Avenue Q once, but apparently they won't accept 10-year-old puppets. That musical is extremely adult. Did you know that, Emily?
2008's In the Heights joyfully celebrates the culture of Washington Heights, one of the neighborhoods near the tippy top of Manhattan. And 2014's If Then utilizes New York to great effect as the show presents alternate timelines for its lead, Idina Menzel. I know her character has a name, but no one cares about that. She's just Idina Menzel in the show. So you will find lots of songwriters, directors, choreographers, and playwrights who continually found inspiration in the Big Apple. Stephen Sondheim has written at least 4 NYC-based shows: West Side Story, Company, Follies, and the semi-autobiographical cult flop Merrily We Roll Along. When it comes to the New York style, though, lyricists like Betty Comden and Adolph Green, book writers like Neil Simon, choreographers like Bob Fosse and Jerome Robbins, composers like Leonard Bernstein and Frank Lesser, and directors like Gower Champion and Michael Bennett are just some of the folks we have to thank for these iconic New York shows. Today, modern musical theater writers like Lin-Manuel Miranda, Janine Tesori, and the newest recipient of the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, Michael R. Jackson, keep this musical theater tradition alive. In the history of the Pulitzer Prize, only 10 musicals have won for drama. 6 of them, Fiorello, How to Succeed, A Chorus Line, Rent, Hamilton, and now A Strange Loop, all take place in New York City. And I've counted at least 16 NYC shows that have all won the Tony Award for Best Musical. Guys and Dolls, Wonderful Town, Fiorello, How to Succeed, Hello Dolly, Applause, Company, A Chorus Line, Annie, 42nd Street, Rent, The Producers, Thoroughly Modern, Millie, Avenue Q, In the Heights, and Hamilton.
New York City
Center of the universe.
is the home to Broadway.
One can't really exist without the other. They are one and the same. And because of this, we've been gifted with tons of musicals and countless songs about this amazing city. So here we go, Gerald. Let's finally take that imaginary trip through the city that never sleeps with the help of Broadway's greatest songwriters.
New York, a hell of a town. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. The people ride in a hole in the ground.
We'll see the shows at Delmonico's and we'll close the town in a whirl.
Yes, you go downtown where the cabs don't stop. Downtown where the food is slop.
The enemy of Avenue A will stay.
Here you see Christopher Street, typical spot in Greenwich Village. On September 12th, right here in front of the Waverly.
The night that Goldman spoke at Union Square. Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square. I'm just a Broadway baby, walking off my tired feet, pounding 42nd Street.
Come and meet those dancing feet. On the avenue, I'm taking you to 42nd Street. NYC, the shimmer of Times Square.
The pulse,
The beat, the drive. In Central Park we'll stroll, where our first kiss we stole.
well, you must take the A train.
Even farther than Harlem to northern Manhattan and maintain. Get off at 181st and take the escalator. You improved and rearranged. It's ever changing, yet it's never changed.
So look at me, I'm the king of New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere.
'Cause history is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest Your homework is to learn a song from one of these amazing New York musicals. As always, many of the soundtracks can be found wherever you stream your music. There are movie versions across various platforms. And of course, you can always find clips and bootlegs on YouTube. Accompany yourself, find a karaoke track, get yourself a pianist, or sing it a cappella, however you want to interpret your New York musical moment. If you need inspiration, we'll post a list of New York musicals in the description. Expand your musical theater knowledge and it'll make you a better musical theater performer. I promise. Until next time, Broadway babies, hit it, Gerald!
Ba 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 da da, ba 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 da da, ba 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 da da, bum.
We'll make a brand new start of it in old New York.
I have to document this. You wearing a Knicks hat?